Hey up, how you doing? I know it's been a while since my last video and I'm sorry about that, but your boy is back. So without further delay, let's crack on with the video. So just before we get started here, I thought it'd be a good time to mention that I'm currently working on a poster for Stephen King's The Dark Tower. I myself am currently on book 6, which is titled The Song of Susanna. For the past few months now, I've been working a lot on my favourite books by Stephen King. I've done pieces based off of It and Salem's Lot. I was going to work my way through the books that I have already completed, but I was just so taken away by the story of The Dark Tower that I felt the need to rush ahead and knock this up. So, as you can see here, what I'm doing is I've got a blue ghost tracery sort of going on, which I have roughly mapped out ahead of time. And I'm now going over that with a fine line metallic pencil. At moments like this, I'm just trying to get all the little tiny details in and trying to be as precise as possible so that later on I've got a good sort of skeletal structure to work off of. As you can see, I'm using a sort of curved tool. I don't know what the proper name of it is, I probably should, but it's great. It's got pretty much every kind of curve you could want on it for different tasks. It's so useful and I use it almost every time I'm doing a drawing for one thing or another. So right here I'm just trying to get in those really intricate little details like the tops of this sort of castle wall structure that I'm putting about halfway up the tower itself. I referenced a lot of images of the Dark Tower that have already been done, but I found that a lot of them were, but there was no sort of distinction between them. There was no distinct pattern that I could see, so it was just sort of, obviously Stephen King has described it as being made of black stone, and you just sort of work off of that. And you know, some people have, you know, gone for a more steampunk vibe. Of some people just, you know, do a straight, you know, no nonsense medieval kind of tower. I just wanted to play around with it. I have a few sort of rough drafts that I'd done, but this was the sort of concept that I eventually decided on. And now that I've finished doing that rough sort of line work, I'm now moving on to this character right down at the bottom. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who is wanting to read The Dark Tower or is just starting out on their own journey with The Dark Tower, but let's just say for those of you who have finished the series or have passed book 3, The Wastelands, at the time of doing this, I had only just finished The Wastelands, and this character I thought was going to have a much bigger part in the story, and that's why he's got such a big part on the page. This character is called the TikTok Man, and no, that is not a reference to the terrible social media app. That is referencing to his oddly perverse love of clocks. He has a clock around his neck in the shape of a coffin. But in the book here, he's described as being this big, beefy, almost cross between a Viking and a Celtic barbarian, I think it was. So, yeah, either way, I just had to get him on the page because he's just such an interesting looking character to draw. But yeah, right now what I'm doing is I'm just mapping out his physique. A lot of it is going to be lost when I go in to do the shading, but I always like to know where things are going, even if I know inevitably they're going to be lost. with moments like this, it's always quite nerve-wracking, especially when you're someone like me who has quite a bit of a heavy hand, which is another reason why I'm now such a big advocate for using a blue pencil when you start your work. Is when you're doing this, initial line work, it's so easy to press down too hard, and then when you try and erase a small mistake, you've imprinted on the paper. So that's 100%. I'm an advocate for using a blue pencil for when you're doing your sketching. It's got me out of so many scrapes in the past. So now that I'm done with him, I'm moving on to the key antagonist character. I wanted to give him a very large presence, compositionally speaking. I wanted him to sort of loom over everything. And again, I'm not gonna spoil too much about his character, other than to just say he is, the pursuit of finding this man is pretty much the central character arc for the main protagonist, Roland Deshane, throughout a large portion of the novels. And now I'm moving on to Susanna, who is one of our quartet, one of our three main journeymen, one of Roland's companions, a integral part of the story, and one of my favourites of the three. It was very important that I wanted to capture her strength, that is referenced throughout the books, but I also wanted to capture her vulnerability as well. It's always been something that I've greatly admired about Stephen King's work, is that he is so able to take a character and show the good sides and the bad. That bring someone together to make them such a human character. You don't just have to be an archetypal strong character or an archetypal weak character. You can have both strengths and weaknesses, and he makes it feel so natural and not so hammed in. And I think it is for that reason that Susanna is one of my favourites. She manages to embody all the sensibilities of a woman who is struggling with a disability and yet does not let that define her. Right now, you can see I'm just starting on what is probably one of the great unsung heroes of this generation. This is Oi, who is a Billy Bumbler, which is just the most amazing name ever. He's the animal companion of Jake, who I'll be getting onto in a minute. He's described as being somewhere between a raccoon and a badger, or I've heard some people call him a raccoon crossed with a weasel or a fox. But I went for the raccoon crossed with the fox sort of look, so I wanted to give him that triangular shaped head, with a very long neck. He's often described as extending his neck out quite long, so I wanted to show that off. Excuse me. I'm now moving on to Jake Chambers, and Jake is, I think, maybe 13 years old. He's the youngest member of the quartet, and he's taken on a sort of almost adopted son role for the adult members. Drawing children is always very complex, because you have to remember the rule of the heads, which is, I think, for an adult, the length of an adult's head, you times that by 8, and that's the full length of the body. But for, I think, a 13-year-old, it is somewhere closer to 4 or 5, maybe 6, actually. I had a graph somewhere that I made once for reference, but I don't have it to hand at the minute. Helped me out a lot when I was doing a university project on children's book stories, and you had to draw a lot of child characters for that. But as well as like sizing, another challenge that you may face when you're having to draw child characters is that you have to employ quite subtle features. You have to go against the instinct to go for the heavier, easier to read facial features. And now I'm moving on to Eddie. Eddie was the first member of Roland's quartet. He was a heroin addict in New York, and even though over the months with Roland he has managed to kick the habit, I always like to think of him as wearing the scars of his addiction on his face. Because even though he's often described as being very handsome, I like to think of him as having a little bit of a sort of haggard look to him that sort of tells that he was a former user, which is quite an interesting character trait, I think. Right now, what I just wanted to do is I wanted to slow it down a bit because most of the video has been this sort of time lapse. I just wanted to slow it down real quick to showcase in a bit more detail my process for doing eyes at these sort of more difficult angles. As you can see, Eddie has got his head tilted slightly. And before I go any further, I've just got to say, if you don't have an electric eraser, then you are missing out. They have saved my arse on countless occasions. But yeah, as you can see, what I'm doing right now is I'm just mapping out the shape of these eyes, and what you have to try and remember is when you've got a character whose head is tilted down slightly, as though they're almost looking through their brow, is that while the overall shape of the lower eye will be unaffected, the upper portion of the eye will have the sort of the meat of the brow cutting through it slightly, so you're not going to have that sort of nice oval shape. It's going to be quite an awkward shape. I wish I wasn't filming this on my phone. I could have got in closer. Maybe I'll zoom in when I'm editing this. But yeah, if I've zoomed in, then forget I'm just talking about this bit. But yeah. So as you see, I've just made a little mistake, and this is why these electric rubbers are so good, because my only other erasers are the size of my bloody thumb, so trying to get out those little tiny errors without completely ruining the face, it would just be impossible. Yeah, I'm just trying to line up the pupils at the moment, which is the hardest part of drawing eyes, I think, because your instinct is just to quickly whack 2 circles in there and just be done. But a pupil is not a perfect circle at the best of times, especially not at any kind of dynamic angle. It's there's a sort of it's warped by its own perspective, and as well, if they're not perfectly facing in the same direction, then you've got a boz-eyed drawing. You know what I mean? And last but certainly not least, we now move on to Roland Deshane, who is the main character of the story and the titular character of the first book, The Gunslinger. Roland is without a doubt one of my favourite of King's characters. He's so completely and utterly unique, and it's in his own uniqueness that I find I love him the most, because, and don't let this put you off, please, it's amazing. Roland is a psychopath through and through, and it's brilliant. Like, well, I suppose I get kicked in the ass for saying it. He's not a psychopath as such. He does feel love and he does feel remorse, but he's, I'd say, more got traits of psychopathy. He's so singularly focused in his goal to find the man in black and to reach the Dark Tower that he is willing to sacrifice anything, even those he loves. And I will not say anything more on that, but Roland is such a complex individual. It's really amazing to see what Stephen King has done with his character. I looked through a lot of references for Roland, and I saw a lot of people had tried to give him a very Clint Eastwood look, and that's pretty much what he is. He is the man with no name. He is Clint Eastwood. He's a gunslinger. And I definitely wanted to show that, but I also wanted to add a few other little inspirations to me. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm a huge gamer, and one of my favourite games ever was Red Dead Redemption. And I've always, since starting the books, always seen a bit of Arthur Morgan in Roland as well. And I wanted to reflect a little bit of Arthur in the way he's dressed and in his face as well. But it's interesting thing to say is I was actually told by someone on Reddit, someone very nice, in no way were they being rude. They commented on the fact that Roland looked oddly similar to the TikTok man, the first character that I was working on, and I can completely see it at this point in the process. They have very similar facial features. I've sort of accidentally fallen into a habit of drawing these rounded noses, big manly chins. So when I take this image onto my laptop to do the inking, I will try and change up that face a little bit. And yeah, right now I'm just finishing it off. I will be uploading the next video soon where I show how I did the shading. And please, if you liked what you see and you want me to carry on doing what I'm doing, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really, really does help me out. And thanks very much. Right, in a bit.